What if we use the RTX 4070 Super to play the latest AAA games at 1080p resolution? Who knows, maybe we'll be able to actually use ray tracing, or maybe achieve a 120 plus FPS experience? Let's find out. To test it out, I've paired the MSI Ventus 2X RTX 4070 Super with the i7-14700KF CPU as part of this pre-built CyberPower PC powered by MSI. If you're interested in any of the products featured in this video, you can find them at the links in the description below. There is no need to spend that much money on Windows 11 Pro when you can get it much cheaper at cdkeyoffer.com. Additionally, use discount code iVadim to get 25% off and bring the total price down to $22. Furthermore, you can find Windows 10 Pro as well as Microsoft Office at much cheaper prices as well. Get yours now at the link in the description below, and don't forget to use discount code iVadim to get 25% off. Alan Wake 2 received a big update that added DLSS 3.5, full ray tracing, as well as ray reconstruction features. That's why I think we should check out this game first. We are at 1080p native resolution, and the graphics quality is absolutely maxed out. So I'm not even using high graphics quality preset, I've maxed out everything. Ray tracing is maxed out as well, and DLSS ray reconstruction is enabled. I want to check out the town area first, because if the 4070 Super cannot deliver a good experience in this particular area of the game, then it means that it will struggle a lot in other areas, such as the forest, for example. And so far we are not getting that 60 FPS experience that I would have liked to see. Sometimes we are almost reaching 60, 58, 59 FPS, but in other scenes FPS dips to around 53, 54. It's not a terrible experience by any means, but it's not a consistent 60 plus. Although it is worth noting that ray tracing looks amazing in this game, and especially reflections. They look beautiful, and they add an extra layer of realism to this game, and I think this is the exact game where that is very important. Bad news is that as soon as we enter any kind of forest area, FPS drops to around 40, sometimes even high 30s. One thing we can do to improve image fluidity is use DLSS frame generation. That actually delivers quite a good experience. 80 plus FPS, sometimes reaching above 90. Nice. The beautiful graphics presentation is preserved, and the controls latency is okay. This is actually quite a good experience in the town area. Let's load into the forest and see if that will change. Even with frame generation, sometimes we do get dips to around 50-ish in the forest area right here. And controls feel a little bit sluggish, because obviously we're getting quite low base FPS. Yeah, and when I aim down the sides, it doesn't feel as nice. It is still playable. I would call this experience acceptable, but you're definitely going to notice that sluggishness when you're aiming down the sides. Just for contrast, let's disable frame generation once more and see what the actual base FPS is in this particular area. And yeah, it's 30-ish. Not that great, not that great. Old school console-like experience right here. It turns out that frame generation was doing quite a lot of heavy lifting. I wonder, will that change if we use high graphics quality preset, which actually lowers some of the graphics effects? Yeah, it's really close to what we've had previously, maybe 1 or 2 FPS more, but there is no drastic improvement in performance. Let's try medium ray tracing preset, because that also looks okay. I wouldn't go as far as low, because that's just not worth it. But medium still looks interesting, so we can work with that. And we're still getting barely above 30 FPS, sometimes dropping to 30 exactly, so that is not a huge difference at all. I'd say that we might as well just keep that ray tracing preset on the highest possible option. No reason to use medium ray tracing preset if we are not getting any significant performance improvements out of it. So let's return that ray tracing preset to high, and let's try using DLSS resolution upscaling set to quality. Personally, I don't like resorting to using DLSS when I'm at 1080p because I like playing on larger screens. For example, this is a 32-inch screen, and I can definitely see the difference between native 1080p and DLSS set to quality. The graphics assets are just not as sharp. They are quite blurry now. When we're looking at finer details such as grass, leaves, any kind of foliage, or even branches, I can definitely see the difference. But you can't argue with that performance improvement. Check this out, where we've previously had just barely 30 FPS, we're now getting 40 plus. Even in this area right here, FPS stays above 40 at all times. This is actually what I consider to be enjoyable experience, because 30 plus FPS is just not enough in my opinion. And now that we have high enough base FPS, 40 plus, we can enable frame generation to improve the image fluidity and the overall gaming experience. And now, even in the forest area, we're getting 80 plus FPS, the image looks nice and fluid, smooth as well, and the controls feel fine. Even when aiming, it's okay. And in the town area, we are getting well above 100 FPS, 115 to 120 in this particular scene inside of this cafe. Oh, it's actually a bar, so forgive me. This is not where you get coffee, this is where you get vodka. Or actually no, they have soda and what appears to be a coffee machine over here. So I stand corrected. A slight ghosting going on when we are looking at bright objects, such as this pasty guy's face against a dark background. Yeah, I can definitely see a little bit of ghosting coming off of his face, leaching into the wall behind him. But that's something that I really had to kind of look for. If you're just walking past, you're not gonna notice that. And in the town area, we're getting 120 plus FPS. Check it out. Pretty nice. Let's go back to native 1080p resolution now, turn off frame generation and turn off ray tracing just to see what it's like to play this game without ray tracing or any upscaling. Graphics preset is set on high, so this is not absolutely maxed out, but close to maxed out. And we're getting 90 plus FPS over here, sometimes going below 90, sometimes going to 100 plus. And in the forest area, check it out. Even when using the 4070 Super at 1080p native, we're still getting dips below 60 in this particular area. This is the worst case scenario, I must say, but still it is kind of incredible that the 4070 Super, which is considered to be a 1440p gaming GPU, cannot handle this game at its worst. Yeah. Next up is Black Myth Wukong. This game also features full ray tracing, so let's start with that, shall we? We are at native 1080p, so let's set that resolution to 100%. I'll set graphics preset to very high, no need to go for cinematic, and let's enable full ray tracing and set it to the highest preset possible, very high. We'll have to reload the game for the ray tracing to be enabled. And it appears that it is a little bit too much to handle for the 4070 Super. Yeah, we're getting just barely 40 FPS. Yeah, well, this is still playable. I don't think this is a pleasant experience at all. considering that we are at 1080p using the 4070 Super. Let's see if we can get a better experience if we lower that ray tracing preset down to medium. Right away we see a huge performance difference from 40 plus to close to 50. And this is actually enjoyable right now. Let's see how the game will handle fighting. Yes, the performance remains solid. 50 plus FPS. Don't forget, we're still using ray tracing, although it's not the highest preset. It means that reflections look kind of horrible, actually. I think I prefer just not using the ray traced reflections at all. Something is really broken about the medium ray tracing, but the shadows, they look very nice. While that is a good experience, let's try and increase that ray tracing back to very high and use resolution upscaling. Let's set it to quality mode, which is 68%. Let's go. And now we can enjoy the highest graphics quality preset, including the highest ray tracing preset at 60 FPS. And reflections look beautiful. Oh, yes. That tree reflects in the stream nicely. And reflections in those puddles also look proper. But I must say that in this game, DLSS resolution upscaling set to quality, upscaling to 1080p doesn't look particularly nice. It looks grainy when you look at characters' fur or the foliage. For example, these pine trees, they look kind of bad on a large monitor. I don't know, maybe it will look okay on a 24-inch screen because pixel density would be much better, but looking at a large screen, this does not look good. And when we're looking at particles, such as the leaves, it's just creating a mess. Let me show you. Right here, it's just something is very wrong in this image right here. This does not look like leaves. There's all sorts of warping going on around those leaves, which makes the image more alive than it should be. Let's try one last thing with ray tracing. I'm going to set resolution upscaling back to 100%, so that's native 1080p. Ray tracing very high, graphics quality very high, and we're going to enable frame generation. Using these settings, we're now getting above 60 FPS. The image fluidity is nice, the overall presentation is good. Even when looking at particles, such as leaves, the image looks okay. For a 1080p experience, this is as good as it gets. My only concern is possible controls latency, so let's check how dodging will work. I can still dodge comfortably, no issues there. The last thing we should check is how the game performs without ray tracing, so let's disable that and keep graphics preset on very high. And of course 1080p native resolution. And we are not quite able to achieve a 120 plus FPS experience using these settings, but we're getting above 100, which is also nice, and the image fluidity looks absolutely beautiful. The controls responsiveness is just insane. That's because we have low latency, and that is going to give us an edge in fights, especially in boss fights when you need every bit of responsiveness from your controls. I think that this is the more superior experience. Ray tracing is just not worth it if it's not going to deliver us a completely fine 60 plus FPS experience at base FPS without frame generation. in order for us to have this extremely good latency and controls responsiveness. And the game still looks good. Of course, we're not getting any of those beautiful reflections, and the shadow quality is much worse. Still, I prefer having high FPS in this particular game. What if we lower graphics to high? Will it be possible to achieve 120 FPS then? Yes, this is it. 130 plus. Ah, beautiful. But we're still getting those spikes in frame rate. That's because this is an Unreal Engine 5 game and there's just no way around it. We're going to experience those stutters no matter what. Although, with that said, I'm curious, what if we lock FPS at 120? Will that eliminate those stutters? Let's see. Okay, so frame rate and frame time graphs are now absolutely flat. This is a beautiful experience, very smooth. But we're still getting those little dips here and there. You see? Yeah, it's still happening, but it's happening much less. Wow, this is actually amazing. You know what? I've just made a discovery. Yeah, I've been playing this game wrong this whole time. That's what you have to do. You have to get FPS that is much higher than the one that you want to cap it to, and then that will eliminate pretty much all of the stutters. Previously we had a lot of stuttering in this area. Just for contrast, let's see. Let me just unlock the FPS once more, and let's just walk around. Where are those stutters? There we go, that was a huge stutter. Any more? No. There we go, another stutter, and another stutter, and another stutter, and another stutter. You see, there's like a lot of stuttering going on when the FPS is uncapped. But once we cap it to 120, it's much better. Take a look at that. Just a tiny stutter right there, and the rest is smooth. Wow. This is a huge difference. So capping your frame rate in this game is definitely the way to go. Let's check if we can eliminate all the stutters by capping frame rate at 90. Will we still see that stutter? It doesn't look like it. It normally happens around here. Huh. This is a completely smooth experience. There you have it. Cap your FPS at 90 if you don't want any stutters, don't use ray tracing, and high graphics quality preset. Although, if we are aiming for 90 FPS, what happens if we use very high graphics preset instead of high? Let's test it. Running around. No stuttering. This is nice. Okay, so there you have it. For a 90 FPS experience, at 1080p, you can still use very high graphics preset, cap your FPS at 90, and you're good to go. Lastly, let's take a look at Cyberpunk 2077, and let's enable the highest graphics quality preset out of them all, Overdrive, which enables path tracing. The only thing I want to do is disable film grain and all of these other features that blur the image. Also, we'll start with frame generation as well as resolution upscaling disabled. And it doesn't look like we are going to have a good time, because we're getting just above 30 FPS, sometimes reaching 40. Let's see if DLSS will help us. Let's set it to quality, and ray reconstruction is on. Let's apply and reload the game. This is better, but because we're seeing just above 60 FPS and 59 just then, it means that in worst case scenarios we'll still experience dips well below 60, And yeah, that is just unfortunate. So even using DLSS quality at 1080p, we cannot enjoy path tracing overdrive mode. I think it's just not worth it. Another thing we can do is enable DLSS frame generation. In terms of image fluidity, this is better. However, we are experiencing all sorts of issues. Like, that is not supposed to be flickering. Yeah, those are just lights. See? Lights. But as soon as we move over here and look at those lights from this angle, there's just a disco going on in there. Yeah. Let's see if we'll see any issues with these stairs. Yeah, there's definitely quite a bit of ghosting happening behind those characters as they walk up the stairs. And even if we choose this guy right here and we start going back and forth, you can see that the stairs, they change color. That is not supposed to happen. It's just ghosting happening right behind the character. Let me demonstrate what the problem is. Look at that NPC right there. Do you see him leaving trail behind him? Yeah, that's what I was talking about when we were talking about ghosting. Other characters, they look okay. So it's kind of a hit and miss. This guy, there's a little bit of ghosting going on. If you look at his feet, you see? Personally, I am not enjoying this experience. There's just too many visual issues for me to enjoy the game. I think we'll have to lower that ray tracing preset. So let's select ray tracing ultra preset, turn off frame generation and turn off resolution upscaling as well. This looks like a more acceptable experience. 60 plus over here. And we're getting dips below 60, 56, 58. Actually, the CPU load is quite high and the GPU is not fully loaded, so we are getting a slight CPU bottleneck in this particular scene. This is interesting because we are using the i7-14700KF, which is quite a powerful CPU. I think we'll have to come back to this scenario and test it again when I get the new Ryzen 7 9800X3D. But what I'm most interested in is how does it look visually? Are we still getting ghosting behind the NPCs? No, not as much. It looks much better. Visually, this experience is acceptable and I would not hesitate playing like this. It's fine. I actually think that some issues might be introduced by TAA. Let's see if these will be resolved if we use NVIDIA's DLAA. DLAA enabled. Let's go. The performance is similar to what we've previously had. So DLAA seems to be working okay. And what in terms of the image quality? Yeah, I think it is better. In terms of ghosting, it's fine. There is some, but within acceptable levels. And in terms of images warping around the characters, yeah, that issue is still present, although it is less noticeable with DLAA. What I'm talking about is how these stairs are just warping around the characters. You see that? Yeah, that is not nice. To improve image fluidity, we can use frame generation. This is now a solid 90 plus FPS experience, sometimes reaching to 100, but mostly staying above 90. In terms of visual issues, I cannot report any as I move around this game. Maybe if we start slowing down the footage, then we'll see some, but as I play the game, it looks fine. The latency also feels great. I can point my crosshairs wherever I want, and it feels precise and responsive. Last thing I want to check is how the game will perform if we disable ray tracing, set the graphics quality to ultra, disable resolution upscaling, so we'll use DLAA, and frame generation off. Will we be able to get 120 plus FPS? Not quite. It is well above 60, going into 90 plus, but then dropping to 80 plus and even high 70s from time to time. While this is still a great experience, we can do better. Let's select high graphics quality preset, DLAA, and now we are close to that 120 FPS. However, we are getting dips below that, and that appears to be because of the CPU. The GPU is not fully loaded. It's at 90% right now. Yeah, we could get a consistent 120 plus FPS if our CPU was better. It's crazy how one of the latest i7 CPUs is not enough to achieve a high refresh rate experience in Cyberpunk. This game came out a long while ago, although it did receive quite a few updates that made it a lot more demanding. Still, we need to upgrade that CPU. That was a wild ride. As it turns out, the 4070 Super is not capable of delivering zero compromise ray tracing experience even at 1080p. In some games, settings had to be adjusted, frame generation had to be used, or resolution upscaling had to be used, which is less than ideal if you're paying $600 plus to play games on a 1080p monitor. It's just not worth it. Personally, I think that this GPU delivers a much better experience if you're using a 4K monitor and using DLSS resolution upscaling to up that performance. Much better overall presentation, image quality, the overall experience is just much more superior if you're using a 4K monitor paired with this GPU. Let me know in the comments what do you think about these results, and if you are interested in any of the products featured in this video, you can find them on Amazon and the links in the description below. Also, reward this video with a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more if you haven't already. It was I, Vadim. Until next time.